Hey guys, so just before we start this video, we do want to kind of explain why this video is so late. I mean, there's not any like real reason. We're just lazy.
Yeah.
But we filmed this video, well, not this part, but the actual video back in like March 13th of this year, so 2021. And we just haven't edited it and uploaded it yet. And what makes it even worse is that the movies that we watched in this video aren't even all the 2020 movies that we watched, because after we filmed this video, all the Oscar nominees were announced. So we watched a whole bunch of movies that were nominated for an Oscar. Yeah, and that came out in 2020. So this isn't even all the movies that we saw from 2020.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I'm not really sure on how to rank them, but like, if you are interested in knowing how we feel about the Oscar movies, we do have a video. We do have two videos actually. Yeah. One vaguely explaining the things that we like about it, about most of the movies, and then another one that's like us giving out our awards.
Right.
If you want to go check those out as well.
Yeah, and we also made a little skit to kind of announce that this video is going to be delayed, and we released it about 10 days ago. We'll put a link up in the top for y'all to watch it and in the description.
And then hopefully after putting up this video, it'll give us like the motivation to actually put up more videos. There is something about list videos that we love making, absolutely love filming. We love talking about them. We love watching them, having them up on the channel. But the one thing that kind of drains us is the editing process.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know what it is about the editing process, but it is like the most energy draining thing I've ever had to do, even though everything else about rank videos is really fun to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know how Sean Chandler does it, but like major respect to Sean Chandler.
Yeah. Hats off to him.
Yeah.
That's all he does.
Yeah. Like, I know like his job is YouTube, but like even then it's like, man, I'm still imagining like if my job was YouTube, like could I do that?
Yeah, I don't even think I could still do that because he does it almost daily.
Anyways, here it is. I guess our long-awaited ranking of our 2020 movies.
Yeah, everybody's been waiting for it.
Yeah, which by the way, in itself is lazy in itself, because we decided not to make our two worst and best list and just do one ranking video. Hey guys, thank you so much for stomping on over here. We are pretty late on this. I will say
very late.
Very late on this. Well, usually the way we try to do these videos, because we always have them at least like a month or so late.
Yeah, it's usually like at the end of January.
Yeah,
that's when we usually
exactly.
wrap it up.
Yeah, and so the one thing you have to understand, which a lot of people do, right? We don't do this full time, and there was a time whenever I had a job that didn't give me a lot of time to do anything. Yeah,
and we were living apart because of the pandemic. You were quarantined with your family, so it was kind of hard to be together for that long.
Yeah, so usually what we'll do in every other year before this, we would take like a whole week off to where we would just watch movies straight that whole week. Like it would be like the beginning of January. Right. Then we could film our video. But in terms of this last year, we had those 10 videos, which if you haven't watched them, we'll put a link. Well, maybe we'll put a link in the description to all of them.
The best of the decade.
The best of the decade videos. We did have.
There'll also be a link up here.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, and then which we probably have a whole folder for those in our folder. Playlist, right? So we had 10 videos for our best of the decade, and that was some of them were filmed last year. Actually, all of them filmed last year. And we just got lazy and didn't make them. We had to edit all those. So we edited all those, and then we got to the point where I was having to find another job. I found another job. Now we actually had time to make it. You know, it was hard for us to find time. Me and you weren't able to have that 1 week off in January where we just watched movies. So we just had to watch movies as we could this year.
And also just one big thing that we forgot to mention is that this video is going to be a ranking of all the movies we watched that came out last year. It's not like a top 10 of the year like we usually do. It's just going to be all the movies that we saw that came out last year.
So for our number 30, we have Artemis Fowl, which straight up, like honestly, is one of the worst movies I've seen in quite some time.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, the movie itself, there was just so much stuff going on, and it felt like it really did feel like it didn't make any sense for this to be one movie. And honestly, I've heard that even if it was more than one movie, the story of it completely goes against the books.
Oh yeah, yeah. It really felt like the entire movie felt like the third act of a movie, or really even like a second or third movie in the series, because it just like threw so many things at the screen at once, and without really like describing what really was going on. Even, which is weird because they even had Josh Gad like narrating a whole bunch of exposition throughout the movie, which was pretty terrible. The voice that he used was even more terrible.
This is about the sun, Artemis Fowl.
But just overall, it was just like a really huge mess of a movie.
Yeah, exactly. And the big problem with the narration, which I think I've talked about this before, there's times where narration works and there's times where it really doesn't. And this honestly is one of the worst examples of narration I've seen in a movie. There was no need for it to be there at all. It wasn't just like exposition. No, not to say this movie was very exposition heavy. Yeah. But this was like exposition to explain what was going on,
right?
Like as you're watching it,
exactly.
You know, so I mean, like, and there's even times where that kind of works, but in this movie, it just doesn't at all.
And there's times when he like explains something, but it's like very surface level stuff. Like when they introduced the Butler character, like he literally just said that he was named Butler, but he didn't like to be called Butler. Yeah, and that's like literally all that character had going for him.
Yeah, and then there was like the Butler's, what was his niece, I think. His niece. This character, they like threw her in this movie, and I swear she was in this movie for like 2 scenes, and like it was like one of the scenes in that one girl in the last Transformers movie, where like it seems like she's gonna be something, and then she's gone for like a huge amount of the movie, and then she randomly pops back in out of nowhere.
Yeah, and like characters flip-flop between like whose side they're on, like at the drop of a hat. Like the one fairy character just was her and Artemis Fowl were completely at odds. They were arguing like crazy, like for like several scenes, and then all of a sudden they decided to be friends. Yeah, exactly. And then Josh Gad's
character was the worst. I know. There wasn't even like a conversation to be had.
Exactly. Yeah, he's like sent in by the fairies to go into the house, and so he's like against Artemis Fowl, but then all of a sudden he's on his side.
Yeah, like out of nowhere, there wasn't like a conversation. Like, okay, now I understand what you're doing this for. It's like, no, bam, I'm over there now. You know?
And then for our 29, we have Wonder Woman 1984, which is a huge disappointing movie because we really loved the first Wonder Woman movie, so we're excited for this one. But this honestly turned out to be one of the worst DCEU films. There was just so many things going wrong with this movie. Just with the villain and just the whole storytelling and everything was just like Artemis Fowl is very messy.
And I'll say that one of the things that really I didn't like about this movie is, I would say I love we love the first movie, but our main problem was the fact that Ares, the fight happened. There was a fight after there was that whole speech. With
Chris Pine's character, Steve.
Yeah,
I was about to say Steve Rogers.
Yeah, Steve Trevor. That there was a huge speech that was kind of showed why she kind of went into hiding and why she kind of went against humanity and why it was like that way in Batman vs Superman. And you would have thought that this movie would have had something, because at the end of that movie, it pretty much turned out that Ares was the reason for that. Probably one of the worst parts about it. But in this movie, it was like, well, maybe something else happens, right? But the end of this movie, because it's that whole wish, all the wishes, whatever, and everybody switches their wish over. So it's like, why is she still against humanity? Obviously, humanity is good enough now to switch to like say, no, I don't want that wish anymore, to help everyone.
Exactly. Yeah, and just how unbelievable it was that everybody reversed their wish. There's bound to be at least one person who doesn't.
Yeah, exactly.
And just the whole villain, Pedro Pascal's character, his motivations and his plan just completely goes out the door like halfway through the movie. Yeah, because like he starts wanting power and all that, but it doesn't really make sense what he's actually going for. And then I'm not even gonna bring up his whole plan with the whole like digital particles touching everybody.
There was just so many things in that movie where it was like, well, we're doing this, so we might as well just keep it going, right? Because the whole wish aspect was kind of just one thing of like anything goes now. It is like there's a certain laziness to it, to where it's like, well, you don't have to think through things logically now because anything can happen. Yeah. Not to mention the fact that there was a whole controversy of Steve Trevor
being his body.
Being in a guy's body, you know, and so
they're that not even being brought up that much in the movie.
And it didn't make any sense because we'd already seen that this power was able to actually create objects from thin air.
Exactly.
So why wouldn't it be able to create him? You know, and so there was just a lot of really huge problems. There's a problem of Cheetah, you know, like her character became forced at the very end of the movie.
Yeah, she was really only there to be a physical threat for Wonder Woman, which that's another thing, that the whole fight, the whole thing with the armor that Wonder Woman had to find. Well, she didn't even find it. It was already in her office.
Yeah.
They built it up to be this big thing, but then it just turned out to be nothing.
Yeah.
Which is same thing with the Cheetah. She was built up to be this character, this physical threat, and then the fight was really mediocre.
For my number 28, I have Trolls World Tour, which I'm going to say is probably a fun movie for kids, but for adults, I mean, it might be fun for adults sometimes, but I will say the movie just has so much stuff going on and it's too crazy to really kind of focus on. And honestly, after a while, just so much crazy stuff's happening, it does to an extent get boring.
But it did break records by being the first movie to be released on streaming and theaters at the same time.
Yeah, it's the reason why
the pandemic.
Yeah, it's the reason why a lot of movies like Universal started having their movies start coming out. You know,
for my number 28, I have The Other Land, which was a very beautiful looking movie, but just overall, I felt like it was really boring. Which I don't really like to say that a lot about movies, but this one, in this case, it really was kind of boring.
So at this point, this is whenever my movies start, this is a weird sentence, but it's where my movies start going to be having some level of not being bad, but at the same time, not being like great. And so I'm gonna go with my 27 being Mulan, which to me was not any kind of insult to the original. And it definitely wasn't awful, but at the same time, it was very dull, very boring. It seems like there's a lot of things that they felt like they shouldn't have done to make things more realistic, but at the same time, they added things in that really kind of drug out the story, really made things kind of really all over the place.
And similar to Marquez, there is a significant gap between My Bomb 3 and this pick. And my 27 is The Hunt, which is actually a pretty fun movie. It does poke fun at both sides of the political spectrum. Just overall, it's kind of fun.
For my number 26, I'm gonna go with New Mutants, which was definitely a very big letdown, considering how much we had to wait on this movie after all the delays. But at the end of the day, that aside, I will say this movie does have its level of very slight enjoyment, and I can understand why someone would like it. But at the same time, this movie does go for a lot of very character cliches of having a group of characters and them all having these certain traits and all standing by those traits. And even though being at times kind of intriguing overall, it does fall flat as a whole.
For my 26, I have Mulan, which definitely wasn't one of my least favorite live action Disney movies, but definitely was far from one of my favorites. It really was very bland. It took away a lot of the joy of the cartoon, and it just didn't have a lot of the emotional weight that the cartoon had.
For my number 25, I'm gonna go with Birds of Prey, and this movie is right in this little gray area of movies, in between movies I didn't like and movies I did like. So it's in a nice little weird area, because to me this movie was not necessarily a good movie, but I'll be lying if I said I didn't have complete fun with it from beginning to end.
For my number 25, I have The Possessor. Well, The Possessor, I think it's just called Possessor. Which when I first watched it, I didn't like it as much until I kind of read and we talked with our sister what it kind of meant. And I liked it a little bit better, but I still don't like it that much. I felt like it had violence just to have violence. And just overall, it wasn't a movie that I particularly enjoyed.
Did I touch your leg just now?
Yeah. I'm trying to cop a feel on me.
And I just want to start this part off by saying, up at this point, this is whenever I start thinking that the movies actually are good. For my number 24, I'm gonna go with Palm Springs, which to me was a very basically good movie. The movie had intriguing enough characters, fun enough characters for you to follow and enjoy it, and the movie itself was just fun overall.
For my number 24, I have The New Mutants, and this had a very rocky road to coming out, because it was supposed to come out, what, like in 2018 or something?
Yeah, I believe so.
But it kept getting delayed because of reshoots and everything, and then the pandemic happened.
Yeah.
So it got delayed even more. But it did finally come out last year in August, I believe. And there were enough good things in the third act of this movie that made me not like it, but at the same time, it wasn't that great of a movie either.
Did you say it had enough good things to make you not like it?
Oh, no, well, sorry, I probably said that wrong. Enough good things in the third act for me to like it, for me to not like it, I guess is what I was trying to say. But it still had a lot of lazy writing.
My number 23 is going to be The Other Lamb, and I do have a kind of differing opinions than Zach does. While I do think this movie was a little too slow at times, I do think to a certain extent it did have a good reason to take its time. I do like the story of this and how it really tells, to me, a decently interesting story about an all-women's cult that's led by a man.
For my number 23, I have Birds of Prey, and this is a movie that was surprisingly wasn't awful when I went to go see it, but it still wasn't that great of a movie. It did have exciting fight scenes, a lot of great choreography with the fight scenes. It was just overall just a pretty fun movie.
For my number 22, I'm gonna go with Possessor. And my opinions kind of pretty much fall with what Zach said. Whenever I first saw this, I wasn't a huge fan of it, but thinking about it, I do like what it was trying to do. I do think there were certain things about it they could have done better. They could have told a more interesting story in this way. And at the same time, like Zach said, also, I do think there was a lot of violence, a lot of gore that just kind of came off as them just trying to keep having gore and violence and violence and violence. I'm not against violence. It's just that sometimes it can be a little much.
I will say one thing I forgot to mention when I was talking about Possessor is that the special effects for the violence was actually really good. And I read that
that's true.
Was the director like the son of somebody? I can't remember, but I do remember that he wanted to use a lot of practical effects in this movie. And before I say this pick, I do want to mention that from here on out, every movie on my list I think is a good movie. My number 22, Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, which I actually really enjoyed quite a bit. This movie is really elevated by Chadwick Boseman's acting, his performance. I'm not just saying that because he passed away. He truly was great in this movie, and it was really enjoyable to watch. And it's really sad that this is actually his last movie, right?
It's either this or The Five Bloods, but I think it's this one.
Yeah, I think it was this one.
Now, I might have differing opinions on this from a lot of people, but my 21 is going to be Soul. Now, granted, this is in the good part of my list, so I do like it. I just definitely don't think it's one of my favorite Pixar movies. This movie had it was really fun. Very great voice acting, even kind of sort of from Jamie Foxx, but at times, I mean, I don't talk about this a lot. I'm not a huge fan of Jamie Foxx as an actor. I felt like in this movie he did pretty well, but overall I think he was one of the worst aspects of this movie. But I do think it was a good movie with great characters and a pretty good story, but overall it probably was not near my favorite movie in Pixar.
For my number 21, I have The Lodge, and this is a very unsettling movie. It's a very well-made horror movie. Oh my goodness.
For our number 20, we're gonna go with Onward. And overall, I think this movie was a very fun movie. And you know, funny enough, my last one was another Pixar movie we got last year. And this, again, is not one of my favorites in Pixar, but it is a good movie. And the end especially, I really love. Yeah,
the ending really made the movie for me, to be honest, because the whole movie is actually it's pretty enjoyable, but it wasn't one of Pixar's strongest. I didn't really feel a connection to it. It just felt like a fun movie. It didn't really have that much to it, but then the end really made up for the rest of the movie.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite things about the end is how it's not like a perfect ending, but it really just feels like that's the way it should have ended. For my number 19, I'm gonna go with Sonic the Hedgehog, which was an extremely surprising movie. I mean, at the time I saw it, it wasn't that surprising because I already heard the good buzz about it, but it was surprising to a lot of people because, you know, most of the time video game movies aren't that good. And whenever this movie was actually announced and with a trailer and everything with the terrible design, which we actually have somewhere in here.
Oh, it's up there.
Yeah, which we actually have this toy right here. This terrible design right here. A lot of people didn't want to see it and were griping about it, but thankfully the people who made this movie are like, yeah, we're gonna help you guys. We're gonna give you a better design, and they did. And overall, the movie, even though the movie, I'm not gonna act like it's fantastic and phenomenal, it's not something you really need in a Sonic movie. You're not looking for that. And overall, it was a very extremely fun, extremely enjoyable, those are pretty much the same words, but it's extremely enjoyable and very funny movie to watch.
I like how you held on your hand the whole time.
Yeah.
Like a Hamlet with a skull. For my number 19, I have Uncle Frank, which is a fantastic movie with a great performance by Paul Bettany in this movie. Really, everybody in this movie is fantastic, and I really recommend this one. I do feel, though, that there were certain scenes and certain moments that I feel like they could have done a little bit better, because I didn't feel the emotion that I felt like I should have had in those certain moments. For my number 18, I'm gonna go with Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, and like Zach said, the best part about this movie is Chadwick Boseman. Honestly, fantastic actor. I just want to stop and say that for a second. I've seen people say that you're just saying that because he died. No, he's actually a fantastic actor. I've seen pretty much a lot. I've seen a lot of what he's done. Fantastic actor in everything he is and everything he's done. And this movie is no exception. Every award that he won, every award that he is nominated for in this movie was definitely deserved. And this movie overall, I enjoyed a lot. It's a very interesting story and really interesting character like Ma Rainey. And I mean, she's also a real person in real life, but just a woman who really was kind of done with the way white people treated black people back then, and just kind of said like, they're pretty much there for me to get things done, but I'm going to do it my way regardless. For my number 18, I have Palm Springs, and this is a movie that's really enjoyable. It has the whole gimmick of somebody living the same day over and over again, which has been done in Groundhog Day, Edge of Tomorrow, and a few other movies, but it does it in a unique way. It starts the movie off with Andy Samberg already having been in this time loop, which hasn't really been done that much. So it's interesting to see him having already been this and already knowing this kind of lifestyle. For my number 17, I was about to say mine again.
I'll just leave. I'll see y'all later.
And for our 17, we both have Tenet, which honestly wasn't one of my favorite Christopher Nolan movies, but it still was pretty great. It had an extremely original plan. It had an extremely original story with the whole idea of time inversion and just that whole mess, which got really confusing, but at the same time was extremely enjoyable to watch.
Yeah, exactly. And I think my favorite thing is I have a lot of respect for people who make these kind of movies, especially like this movie. There was so much thought put into the concept of this movie, put into the idea of this movie. Just pretty much, you know, I can imagine he had just like storyboards surrounding his entire room, just like trying to figure all this. And there's just so much respect for the thought that was actually put into this. If there's any, probably the big complaint that we have about this movie really doesn't have it really doesn't have characters in general. The characters are just, they're just like people to make sure the plot keeps going.
Yeah, it is extremely focused on just the plot. Mm-hmm. And it kind of forgot about the characters.
Yeah.
The main character doesn't even have a name.
Yeah, exactly.
It's called the protagonist.
For my number 16, I'm going to go with Run, which is a very thrilling movie. And probably one of the coolest things about this movie is they actually got a girl who does use a wheelchair to be in this movie. So everything in this movie, the way she moves, really is very authentic. The characters are really well done, and the reason people do certain things in this movie, even though not understandable, it does make them very interesting.
For my number 16, I have Sonic, and like Marquez said, which I pretty much agree with everything Marquez said, so I won't say too much about this movie, but it was surprisingly pretty enjoyable. For a video game movie, it was actually pretty great. Just overall, it was a really surprising movie. It's not like it invented anything new. It's not like it did anything different, but it was just a really fun movie.
For my number 15, I'm going to go with The Lodge. It was a very disturbing, very well done, isolated horror movie. And the story of it is very original.
For my number 15, I have Run, which was a very suspenseful movie. Just the whole story about a girl who's just graduated, who kind of figures out that her mom isn't all that she thought she was.
My number 14, I'm gonna go with Host, which is a very interesting concept, a very interesting idea to have this horror movie be done over Zoom during the pandemic. And overall, this is a very mainstream kind of horror movie, but done in a very unmainstream way.
For my number 14, I have Minari, which is a very heartfelt movie. Stephen Yeun gives a great performance. Everybody in this movie gives a great performance. Even the actor who plays the little boy, I think his name is Alan S. Kim, he does really great too, which you never know what you can get with the kid actors. So it was nice that he was actually really good in this movie.
For my number 13, I go with Uncle Frank, which is a very heartfelt, very wonderfully written movie. Fantastic characters, really phenomenal performance by Paul Bettany. But if I had to say anything negative about this movie, it's just the fact that I felt like this movie could have been like 30 minutes longer at least. There's a lot of scenes in this movie that I feel like they try to just do them and make sure they could get them done. And I feel like there's a lot of parts that you really should have hung on to for just a little bit more time, because I feel like there's a lot of times where they could have pulled a lot more emotion out of me that they didn't.
For my number 13, I have Soul, which surprisingly was actually one of the funniest Pixar movies in my opinion, but also dealt just with a person's meaning in life, which I thought was very great. The way they did it was very well done, especially for a kid's movie.
For my number 12, I'm gonna go with His House, which is a very metaphorical horror movie. And this movie, it's another movie that I have a lot of respect for because of the amount of thought that would have gone into this movie, the metaphors, the meaning of this film. And at the end of it, I really didn't fully understand what was actually happening and what the meaning of this movie was. But the reason why I love this movie and a lot of movies like it is that the idea of having to delve into this movie and having to research, look into things to fully understand and fully appreciate it.
For my number 12, I have Host, which like Marquez said, this movie was completely written, filmed, edited, everything during the coronavirus pandemic. They even mentioned the pandemic in the movie. And it's all done through Zoom, which was done really well. Just overall, it wasn't anything like over the top great, but it was very expertly made with what they had.
My number 11, I'm going with Vast Night, which is a independent film that is very expertly put together. There's a lot of shots in this movie that they got very creative with in order to film them correctly. And this movie, it does take its time. It is very slow at times, but there is definitely a reason for it.
For my number 11, I have The Gentleman, which is a very intriguing movie. It's very fast paced. It does have its funny moments that are actually pretty funny.
My number 10, I'm gonna go with Minari. And Stephen Yeun, I haven't seen him in a lot of things other than The Walking Dead. And in that show, he was a good actor. But honestly, I didn't really know his potential, his range. And this movie he really shines in this movie. He really shows what he can do. I'm really excited to see what else he does. This whole movie is a very, very well put together movie, very great story. And honestly, it's a lot funnier than I thought it was gonna be. Very enjoyable movie.
For my number 10, I have His House, which is a very creepy horror movie. The atmosphere in this movie was just so great. The acting was phenomenal. And I just love the whole like kind of message of the movie, just what people do in desperation and just the consequences that they have because of those decisions.
Who directed this guy? Not Guy Fieri.
Who directed this
Gentleman. No, I said who directed that. I said Guy Fieri. Did Guy Fieri direct The Gentleman?
Yeah, he might have.
What's his name? Guy.
Now I just think I know it's Guy Ritchie.
Guy Ritchie. Okay. Yeah, The Gentleman, directed by Guy Fieri. Yeah. For my number 9, I'm gonna go with The Gentleman, which is a very, like Zach said, fast-paced movie. Very, very funny, absolutely hilarious at times. And overall, this movie is just beautifully edited and extremely satisfying.
For my number 9, I have The Vast Night, and this is a very low-budget movie, and they do the most with what they have, and it really pays off because it really feels a lot like a Twilight Zone episode, which if I had any complaints about this movie, I feel like it could have been shorter because it did feel a little bit stretched out at times. But overall, it was really well made. The special effects but overall, it was just really well made. The acting in it was great. And when they had special effects, which there weren't that many times, but when they did, it was really well done.
My number 8 is going to be I'm Thinking of Ending Things. This is one of these movies that I absolutely pretty much love, just because of the idea, like I've said a few times in this video, the idea that so many things don't really maybe not make complete sense, but they are there for a reason and you can fully understand them later. I do like that this movie does have a certain level, it's a very slim level, but it's a very certain level of straightforwardness. You do understand what kind of is happening by the end of this movie, but you don't understand all the little details. If I did have one complaint for this movie, which if you go back on our channel a few videos back, we do have a video of our biggest complaint with this movie, and it is the second car ride scene. I do think that if that car ride scene wasn't in this movie, like the entire length of it, I would like this movie quite a bit more. It would go up a lot further. But overall, other than that car ride scene, I absolutely love this movie, and it's why it is in my top 10.
For my number 8, I have Promising Young Woman, and this movie, for like this first like 2/3 of the movie, I felt it was a really good movie. I didn't really have that many complaints about it. It did feel a little bit on the nose with some of the messages it was trying to convey, but the ending really elevated this movie, in my opinion. It went a completely different route than I was expecting, and the path they decided to go on really paid off.
Oh, we both have this.
What is it?
Invisible Man.
Okay.
For our number 7, we're going to go with The Invisible Man, which to me was a very surprisingly great movie, because whenever I first saw the trailer, I wasn't interested really at all. It just looked like some run-of-the-mill mainstream horror movie with a whole bunch of cliches. But like after you watch this movie, you'll understand this movie is actually a pretty well thought out movie with the horror elements being very well done.
Yeah, I really feel like Winnell deserves a lot more recognition for a lot of the work that he's done, and this is no exception to a lot of the great work that he's done in the past.
For my number 6, I'm going to go with Promising Young Woman, which to me is a very great movie that is a really cool balancing act of completely opposite tones, of at one point being this really dark, kind of depressing movie, and at another point also being kind of a happy-go-lucky movie, but the tones really do mix together well in order to present a very big ending and a very big twist all throughout. Well, I mean all throughout, but especially the last part of it. And
the whole movie is a twist.
The whole movie, twist all throughout. It's like Star Wars: The Last Jedi, twist after twist, you know. And I absolutely love what they decided to do with the ending. It's a very risky decision. A lot of people may not like it and probably don't like it, but overall, it was a very, like I said, very risky decision. But to me, it really paid off and gave this movie an ending that would have otherwise made it fall short if they'd done another route.
For my number 6, I have I'm Thinking of Anythings, and like Marquez said, we do have a video on our channel where we talk about just our complaint about the one scene, the second car ride scene. And like Marquez said, if that scene was shortened down a little bit, this movie would be a little bit higher on my list, because this movie is a very metaphorical.
It's a medical movie.
Yeah, it's a very medical movie. And after watching this movie, if you don't really understand what it's going for, which I don't really blame you, because I didn't really fully get it either. I'm kind of stupid. But if you actually look into what is actually the metaphor for the movie is, it's actually pretty great, and you realize just all the little hints that it actually does give you throughout the movie.
So guys, here we are at the top 5. Our top 5 is just gonna be me and Zach, because we have the same top 5. And so we're gonna go and talk about those now with our first one. Our top 5, or oh my goodness. Our number 5 being The Platform, which if you haven't heard of this movie, honestly, it's not surprising. I haven't heard really anybody talk about this movie. The only person I've ever heard talking about this movie is Zach and
And the only reason I know about it is because me and Brittany's mom told us about it. I don't know where she heard about it, but it is on Netflix if you want to check it out.
Yeah, and it's a really cool movie. It's an interesting movie, which I will say this movie does have it has a very straightforward message. It's kind of obvious what it's going for. It really goes over the gap of wealth that is present in capitalism.
Yeah, and it's a really dark movie. It is also a foreign language movie, so you do have to read. I would not advise watching the dub. The first time I watched it, it was the dub version, and it was awful because I didn't know you could change the languages on Netflix.
Yeah, first of all, if it's ever, unless it's a cartoon, never watch a dub. Never.
Of course.
Dubs are the worst.
But then when we showed Marquez, I watched the sub version, which is a lot better. But overall, like Marquez said, it is a movie about capitalism and does it in a really intriguing way. For our number 4, we have The Devil All the Time, and there's another Netflix movie that just has a lot of different storylines going on, and it really ties them all together really well. Everyone acted phenomenally in this movie.
In this movie, to me, and some people don't feel like this, but to me, it does one thing well that I think, well, it does a lot of things well, but it does one thing pretty good that I think a lot of movies don't get, and what we talked about earlier, which is narration. I don't like narration that often. I do like it in this movie. I haven't really been able to put my mind on top of why I like it. I just do. It's some reason or another, it presents the story in a way almost like a book. And I mean, it is a book, but like, you know, the way it presents it, it just feels right. Also, I absolutely love the ending of this movie. The ending of, you know, I mean, we've said a lot of spoilers in here, but just in case, you know, I'll just say it again. But there's spoilers, but the ending, the idea that you don't need to know everything. I do love whenever movies really treats its audience with respect, saying like, well, I believe I respect you enough to say, hey, I don't need to tell you everything. I want you to think maybe what route do you think this person's going to take? Do you think he's going to go over here? Do you think he's going to go over there? And I believe in you to be able to make that right decision. I do believe you can actually kind of think things down in order to know what decisions he does make. But
don't worry, in 6 years they're going to make a movie that tells exactly what.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
And also a fun fact about the narration: the narrator of this movie is actually the author of the book that this movie is based on.
For my number 3, I'm gonna go with Judd Apatow. Just him in general. Judd Apatow.
He deserves to be number 3.
For our number 3, we're gonna go with The King of Staten Island. It's a comedy and it's absolutely hilarious. I love this movie because it's another movie that does a great balancing act of the idea of it's a complete comedy. Complete comedy. I'm telling you. I don't know why I said that. I'm telling you. I'm telling you guys, it's a complete comedy.
Breaking news. This will shock you. Just a warning for everyone going to this movie.
Yeah, it's
a comedy. Yeah. Don't be expecting anything else.
It's 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm just trying to say stuff.
Is it 3 o'clock in the morning?
Yeah, it's 3 o'clock in the morning.
Oh my goodness.
I'm trying to say stuff right now. It's a complete comedy, but at the same time, it does tell a really dark story about someone who's struggling very badly with mental illness, specifically borderline personality disorder.
Yeah, and going into this movie, I wasn't really expecting much from it, to be honest, because I mean, Judd Apatow is pretty good director, but I've never been like a huge fan of his movies. But this honestly, by far, is one of my favorite of his movies because it really is a character study of Pete Davidson's character and just him trying to deal with life, with everything he's had to go through in the past. And it really is kind of cool that it is kind of a semi-biopic of Pete Davidson because he did lose his dad, who was a firefighter in 9/11. So
yeah, and one thing I actually like about this movie a lot, I always say one thing, but a lot of things, but the one thing I do want to bring up is the idea that his dad did die in 9/11, but in this movie he does just die in a fire, like a house fire or something. I can't remember, it's just a fire. And I do like the idea that they changed that. There is a certain amount of focus that they were able to keep with this movie by changing it from 9/11 to just a house fire in order to tell the story, you know? And also, I just love this movie. It's a very grounded comedy. And one of my favorite things that a lot of comedies don't do, and why I think this movie needs a lot more praise, is the ending. And I don't want to go into spoiler territory on this, and I won't go too much into it. But the idea of, like I said earlier, we don't need to know everything. This movie doesn't end with, he's going to do this, he's going to do this, he's going to have a fantastic life. It ends with, I don't know exactly what you're going to do, but I know you're on the right track.
Exactly, yeah. It was just enough character development to show that he is going to go on the right path now. Yeah. Well, he's most likely going to go on the right path now. For my number 2, I'm here. And for our number 2, we have Bad Education, which is a drama about something that happened. Why am I saying like this? Just say it's based on a true story. A drama based on something that actually happened, which is a movie based on a true story. And it's a movie that is it's pretty great how it's about a criminal who's doing illegal stuff. But at the same time, it doesn't show them as just like a cartoonishly bad guy. I mean, it doesn't absolve him of the actions that he's doing, but at the same time, it's just kind of a gray area of characters.
Yeah, and because of that, you do feel this certain level of sympathy for him, where whenever things don't go his way, you feel actually really bad for him. But at the same time, you're like, well, I mean, it's not like he doesn't deserve it. You know, he actually did something terrible. And so I do love that movie, a movie with the capability of doing that, of straddling that line. Also, I just want to bring up Hugh Jackman. Hugh Jackman, honestly, I don't know how that guy hasn't been nominated for an Oscar yet.
It's real.
Yeah, I was about to say I don't know how he hasn't been nominated for an Oscar yet.
And it really sucks that he's not eligible for this movie because something about how like it came out to HBO.
Yeah.
So it's like a TV movie.
Yeah.
So it's not eligible for the Oscars, which really sucks because I really want him to be nominated or win an Oscar especially because he was robbed for Prisoners. I'm just gonna say that.
Yeah, robbed, dude.
And every day, she's wondering why I'm not there to fucking rescue her. Do you understand that? Right. Me, not you, but me. Every day.
Like this guy, he's a very underrated actor, and honestly,
underrated because people just think of him as Wolverine.
Yeah, exactly. It's a sad.
He has a lot of range.
Yeah, a lot of range. If you haven't seen Prisoners, go see Prisoners. He does fantastic in that movie, and go see this one. He really just shows how much range he's able to have, especially with this character with so much stuff going on. He has to really display two different types of personalities for this movie. And
then one last thing that's kind of a fun fact for this movie is that the person who wrote this movie actually was in middle school at the school district where the story that this movie is based on took place.
And here we go, guys. For our number 1 of 2020, we're going to go with The Trial of the Chicago 7. This movie, I'd never really heard about this trial before seeing this movie, so I'm glad that they did make a movie about this because I've heard about it.
Yeah, it's just crazy. I mean, I don't think it was ever mentioned in the education system because I don't really remember ever hearing about it.
Yeah, I know, and it's surprising because it's one of the craziest court cases that might have ever happened in American history. I have heard about this case afterwards, and I think Legal Eagle talks about it a little bit. Mm-hmm. And it's really interesting what they're able to do by getting this 6-month court case and condensing it down to one, 2.5 hour movie.
Right.
And actually doing it well. It flows wonderfully. It never feels like there's a jump. It never feels jump to jump to jump or whatever like that. It just feels very well flowed. Mm-hmm. And this movie is actually way funnier than I thought it was going to be.
I was expecting just a drama. And Aaron Sorkin, honestly, is becoming one of my favorite filmmakers. Mm-hmm. Because he's able to just write a movie that's very fast paced and, like you said, never feels like it's jumping around too much. Even going into this movie, I didn't even know it was an Aaron Sorkin movie. I didn't know that he wrote it or directed it. And just while watching it, I felt like I was thinking to myself, like, this really feels like an Aaron Sorkin movie because it was just so fast paced. The dialogue in his movies as well is really captivating.
Well, there you go, guys. That's the ranking of the 30 movies that we saw in 2020. I know this is probably a long, actually, I don't know, maybe it's like 20-30 minutes, I don't know, but I feel like this is at least like 45 minutes to an hour long video,
unfortunately. But
yeah, man, I'm knocking my microphone down.
You gotta drop the mic.
Yeah. But we really just didn't feel like making 2 more list videos. Even this is one long video, it's just one long video we got to throw out there. We didn't feel like making 2 ones, but I'm glad we at least got 2 ones. 2 ones. We didn't feel like making 2 different list videos, but I am glad that we actually got this out there. And I mean, I'm glad that we got to watch the movies for this too, because like I said, like a lot of these movies are actually fantastic in 2020. A lot of people don't know that a lot of movies actually did come out in 2020.
Yeah,
you know, they like
maybe not theaters, but
maybe not theaters, but a lot of movies actually did come out in 2020, and a lot of them were actually very good. Well, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also, comment and tell us what you thought about this video, what you thought about our ranking, and also let us know what your ranking is of your movies of 2020. Also, just want to point this out. We need to get back onto it, but we do have a podcast called the Awesome Drone Podcast. We will put a link in the description or put a link somewhere. I don't know. Maybe it's floating around in the screen. I don't know. If you don't like to watch podcasts, you like to listen to them, we are also on Spotify, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts. So if you want to check that out, you can go and do that.
And we also have social media. We have Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, all at 2AwesomeMen. And I just knocked that over my microphone.
And as always, thank you so much for watching, and you will see us later.